Earlier in the year, I took a look at the new BMW 118i, the entry-level version of BMW's 1 Series hatchback. And while a controversial car, given that BMW has moved it from a rear-wheel drive platform to a front-wheel drive one, it's a car I actually came away very impressed by. But what I didn't talk about much in my review of the 118i is the high-performance version of the 1 Series, the M135i, which is a car that, while very similar visually, is completely different underneath.
While the identical Storm Bay metallic paintwork of this M135i and the 118i I previously drove doesn't help with distinguishing between the two, it does highlight just how subtle the changes are. Things like the matte grey highlights for the grille, mirrors and badges, and the additional gloss black front lip and side skirts, for instance, are all blink and you'll miss at points of difference, while the bigger wheels you'll only really spot when it's parked up like this. In fact, it's only at the rear that the changes are particularly apparent. A more aggressive diffuser with dual exhaust outlets and a more pronounced rear spoiler do help set it apart, but it does mean you'll only spot the difference if you're stuck behind one in traffic, and not if it's coming towards you, unless, of course, you're a massive anorak. I should add that, personally, I like the way that it looks. That cheeky grin at the front is very bold, and the rear end does look suitably toughened up. Inside, the story is much the same, as it only builds upon the regular car's interior with a couple of additional niceties, such as a Harman Kardon stereo, dual zone climate control, and some very comfortable and supportive power adjustable two-piece front bucket seats that look particularly striking in this magma red leather. A different font for the dials aside, it's all business as usual, meaning you get the same great iDrive system with wireless Apple CarPlay, enlarged rear seat, although a centre armrest is still missing, and the same big boot. Clearly then, it's all much the same at first glance.
But while visually, at least, there are clear similarities between the M135i and the lesser 118i, underneath, the two cars couldn't be more different if they tried. Unlike in the 118i, where you got a 1.5 litre 3-cylinder engine, the M135i has a 2 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It's got 225 kilowatts and 450 newton meters, which, and there's no subtle way of putting it, is more than double the power that the 118i has. It's also the most powerful 4-cylinder engine BMW has ever fitted to a production car. And the differences don't just end there. Unlike in the 118i, which is front-wheel drive only, the M135i is all-wheel drive, although it is a front-bias system. Most of the time, it does just run as front-wheel drive, but it can send up to 50% of the power rearwards. It also has an 8-speed torque converter automatic in place of the 7-speed dual clutch you get in the base model, which does make it a lot smoother around town, and it is a very smooth transmission. But when you are getting on it, it doesn't shift perhaps quite as quickly as you might hope for. Now, with that much power on tap, obviously it is blisteringly quick in a straight line. 0 to 100 takes just 4.8 seconds, and it makes an absolutely fantastic noise on the way there. They say with great power comes great responsibility. Well, thankfully, this thing is very responsible with how it manages that power because of the all-wheel drive system, among other things. I mean, you can feel it when you turn into a corner and just mash the throttle. You can feel it sorting it out. It moves the power around exactly where you need it, and in the dry at least, you can just be an idiot, quite frankly, put your foot into it at completely the wrong point in a corner like I'm going to now, and it just sorts it out. It just totally handles it with no problems at all. The front end grip is excellent too. Turn-in is very sharp, and through the corners it is incredibly flat. One of the flattest handling cars I've driven in quite some time. I mean, it's a very impressive package. It really is. Now, while I do really like the way this car drives overall, it's not without its weaknesses, chief among which is, you know how I said in the dry, you can just turn in hard into the corners and the front end grip is there and you can get on the throttle early on the exit and it just sorts the power out? Well, in the wet, it's a completely different story because that front end grip, it's all gone. This thing understeers like a pig when it's raining. And when you get back on the throttle, it torque steers like a derailed train. Another thing as well is that while it is very flat through the corners, that comes down to the fact that the suspension is very firm. As soon as you start thinking about it, you do feel a lot of the bumps being transferred through to the cabin. Of course, the very comfortable seats do absorb some of it, but not nearly all of it. And of course, this is a hot hatch. It's going to have fairly firm suspension, but it is also a BMW. It needs to be kind of luxurious as well. So finding a better balance between the two, I think, would have been beneficial. As soon as you pop it into sport mode as well, that's another source of criticism. In comfort, the steering, it feels nice and fairly progressive, if a little numb, but BMW-ish enough nonetheless. In sport mode, the weight of it and the feel of it is more artificial than most of the ingredients on the back of a crisp packet. Thankfully, there is a sport individual mode that you can configure all the settings yourself, so you can leave everything else in its most aggressive setting and pop the steering back into comfort. So that does solve that problem, but still, it's worth mentioning. And then, of course, there's the cost to mention as well. While the 118i starts at around 42 grand, this starts at more like 63, and as tested, it's closer to 70 for a hatchback.
Okay, so it's expensive, but it does go some way to justifying that cost. Between the thrilling performance from its cracking 4-pot engine, the superb build quality, and its excellent interior tech, it's certainly a step above many run-of-the-mill hot hatches. However, there's no denying that its lackluster wet weather performance is disappointing, especially given how competent it is in the dry. It's certainly very possible to get as much bang as you can here for less money elsewhere, even if you'll be missing out on the 1 Series luxury feel and badge appeal. Look at it this way though, the new M135i is BMW's first attempt at making a transverse platform all-wheel drive hot hatch, and as first attempts go, I think it's an admirable one. Yes, it needs far more polish on it, as the sheer grunt it has exposes the shortcomings of a front drive-based platform in a way that the 118i's lighter and less powerful 3-pot doesn't, but I don't doubt that with time on its side, BMW will be able to work its magic with this thing. Eventually.